Hello everybody, it's Miss Fincham and we'll be starting off Unit 1 by covering topic 5.11, which is the concept of the ecological footprint. Thanks to Jordan Smeeds for the slides and notes outlines that we use in class. The ecological footprint is a way to measure the total amount of land that's taken up by the consumption of an individual or of a group. We'll discuss how it's calculated and what factors go into it. We'll also discuss ways to lower ecological footprints. Our objective for today is to be able to explain the variables that are measured in an ecological footprint. We'll also look at how resource consumption and waste production factor into ecological footprints. And then finally, our suggested science practice for the day is to be able to explain what data imply or illustrate about an environmental issue. An ecological footprint is the measure of how much a group or person consumes expressed in an area of land. If we take a look at this image here, it's a nice graphic that we can refer to as we run through the factors. The factors are going to include land that's required for food production, or how much land is required to grow all of the food that you eat. The raw materials you use, so the clothes you wear, the car you drive, the house you live in, all of those come from raw materials that require land to be harvested and then turned into new products. We have housing, which is how much space does your actual house take up. There's electricity production, which means we have to mine coal and burn it to produce electricity, or natural gas and burn that to produce electricity. Even if we're getting our electricity from solar panels or from wind turbines, those still require raw materials to be built. We have to account for the land that's required for our energy production. Finally, we also have to account for waste. All of the waste that we produce, the garbage, this is going into a landfill that takes up land as well. All of those factors go into the ecological footprint for either an individual or for an entire group. What is the difference between ecological footprint and carbon footprint? Remember that ecological footprint is the measure of all the consumption for a group or individual, but expressed in terms of land. The units usually used with ecological footprints are GHA, or global hectares. This refers to biologically productive hectares, and hectares are about 2.47 acres. An acre is roughly the size of a football field, so a hectare is roughly 2.5 football fields. The carbon footprint is measured in tons because it's the total amount of carbon dioxide that is produced from the activities and consumption of a group or individual. We can actually look here at my ecological footprint and my carbon footprint. So my ecological footprint is 2.6 global hectares, and my carbon footprint is 4.2 tons of CO2 per year. That's all the land required to support my lifestyle, my level of consumption, the food I eat, the place I live, the travel I do, and it's also the amount of carbon dioxide released by all of my consumption and activities. This includes all of the travel that I do, all the food I eat, my home, the raw materials that are used in my goods. That's what these numbers are representing. We'll be calculating our ecological and carbon footprints in class. Now let's take a little bit closer look at the factors that determine carbon footprints. Carbon footprints include all of the carbon dioxide released from materials and goods. This includes all of the goods that a person or a group consume, which require carbon dioxide emissions. Carbon dioxide is emitted when the groups are shipped. When they're transported, there's carbon dioxide that is often emitted from the packaging that they come in. There's carbon dioxide emitted from the harvesting of the natural resources and the production of the goods themselves. Pretty much every step of the process requires the emission of carbon. Then we have food production. Farmers use equipment to clear their land. Those run on fossil fuels. That's going to produce carbon dioxide. Farmers also use equipment to harvest and ship their crops. That's going to emit carbon dioxide as well. We can look at energy. When you use gasoline in your car, that emits carbon dioxide. Heating your home by burning natural gas That's methane, or CH4. The mining of that releases CO2, and there's another form of carbon emission. Electricity also contributes to your carbon footprint because we have to burn coal or natural gas that can increase or decrease the carbon footprint of an individual or group. So what affects our footprints? Affluence is a big one. The more affluent you are, the more wealthy you are, the higher your carbon and ecological footprint. That's because you're more likely to have a larger house, which takes up more space, but also more raw materials. You're more likely to travel, so you're going to use more gasoline. The more affluent an individual or society is, the more goods they consume, so the more raw materials they need. There's also going to be a huge correlation between consumption and ecological and carbon footprint. That's because it takes way more energy, way more land, and way more water to produce 1 pound of meat protein versus a pound of plant protein. Meat production takes far more land input and energy input than it does to grow the plant protein. Finally, fossil fuel usage is a huge one. The amount of travel that a person does is going to greatly increase someone's carbon footprint. You might have electricity. They might use a large amount of plastic items. Plastic requires fossil fuels in order to be manufactured, packaged, and shipped. That's going to result in an increase in a footprint as well. Now, factors that decrease ecological and carbon footprints include renewable energy sources. Carbon footprint decreases anytime that a country or a group of individuals can use more renewable energy sources like wind and solar. They're going to decrease their carbon footprint and their ecological footprint using public transportation, which is great because that's going to minimize gasoline consumption, which minimizes CO2 production and your carbon footprint. A plant-based diet will also decrease your ecological and carbon footprint. Finally, just less consumption overall lowers your footprint. Buying recycled goods or buying used goods or not buying goods at all is going to decrease your carbon footprint. This causes fewer raw materials that have to be used and less of a carbon and ecological footprint to be created. Finally, we put this all into the context with a look at the global ecological footprint. We can also measure the ecological footprint expressed in the number of Earths, meaning how many Earths would it take to sustain the lifestyle for a given individual or a given person. Now, for reference, the United States, if everyone in the world lived like the average American, we would need 5.1 Earths to support that lifestyle. That means we need 5.1 Earths worth of resources if the entire world were going to consume the way that Americans consume. You can see we're using quite a bit more than our fair share for reference. The entire global ecological footprint is 1.85 Earths. What that means is right now, all of humanity collectively using 1.85 times what the Earth can generate in 1 year. In 1 year, we're using almost double what the Earth is capable of producing and supporting in any given year. We're already, as a global society, living in an unsustainable way when it comes to our ecological and carbon footprints. Our suggested science skill for 5.11 today is to explain what data illustrate about an environmental issue. Take a look at this graph, and I want you to describe one factor that accounts for the difference in carbon footprints between the United States and Uganda. Think about the items listed in your notes that affect carbon and ecological footprints and what might be different between the two countries. Then I want you to explain one environmental consequence of this factor. When you're finished, I want you to take a picture of your notes and upload them into Canvas where it says 5.1 notes.